Welcome to Poland Daily. My name is Aleksander Wierzejski. Poland has 21 days to respond to a letter of formal notice sent by the European Commission. The letter formally opens infringement proceedings over alleged breaches of the EU law. The EU views that the Polish Parliamentary Committee on Russian Influence is at odds with European values. The Commission considers that the new law unduly interferes with the democratic process. The activities of the committee, for example, investigations and public hearings, risking to create grave reputational damage for candidates in elections, and by finding that a person acted under Russian influence could limit the effectiveness of the political rights of persons elected in democratic elections. According to the EU officials, the new law provides a very broad and unspecified definition of Russian influence and activities. The committee may impose sanctions prohibiting a public official to hold functions relating to the use of public funds for a period for up to 10 years. This is similar in nature to measures provided for in the criminal code. These sanctions are applicable also to behavior which was legal at the time of conduct. Thereby, the law violates the principles of legality and of non-retroactivity. The committee's decisions are subject to review only by administrative courts, which is limited to the requirements of respect of the law and cannot review the correctness of the assessment of facts and the weighing of evidence as conducted by the committee. Finally, as regards the processing of personal data, the new law does not provide for a proper legal basis for the proceeding nor the necessary safeguards for sensitive data. It is incompatible with the EU data protection rules. Poland has 21 calendar days to reply to the letter of formal notice. If it does not address the Commission's grievances, the Commission may decide to send a reasoned opinion as the next step in the infringement procedure. Poland has not only the full right, but also the duty to investigate Russian influence in Poland, stated the Minister of European Union Affairs, Szymon Szynkowski-Welsenk, when asked about the European Commission decision on the law referred as Lex Tusk. On his Twitter account, the Polish minister said, "Our goal is clear, to investigate and limit Russian influence in Poland and Europe. We are convinced that all democratic states and institutions should be united in this endeavor. We will pass on the legal and factual arguments in this case in a calm manner after we have listened to the concerns of the European Commission." Today, the Catholic Church is celebrating the solemnity of the Most Holy Body and the Blood of Christ, known in Poland as Corpus Christi. At the center of the celebration is the Eucharist, in which the spiritual life of the Church is concentrated, said a spokesman of Polish Episcopate Leszek Gęsiak. If you want to live our Christianity to the full, it is difficult to imagine that we can do so without being members of the Eucharistic community, that is, without coming to the Lord's table. More on the story, Paweł Błoch of Telewizja Republika. The immediate cause for the establishment of the solemnity of the festival was the apparitions of St. Juliana of Corleone. In 1245, St. Juliana is said to have an apparition of Christ, asking for the feast of the Eucharist to be established in the first Thursday after Trinity Sunday. Influenced by these apparitions, Bishop Robert instituted the Feast of Corpus Christi in 1246 and inaugurated the first Eucharistic procession. The devotion to the Eucharist that developed in the 13th century gave rise to this feast. The festival arrived in Poland in 1320 during the reign of King Władysław Łokietek. Initially, it was celebrated only in the Diocese of Kraków, but by the end of the 14th century, Corpus Christi was celebrated throughout the country. As every year, Poles flocked to the Eucharistic processions. Whether in Warsaw or in a small village in the Podkarpacie region, Catholics everywhere proclaimed the presence of the true God in our midst. Poland's Corpus Christi processions are known throughout the world. The tradition of flower carpets from Spicimierz near Łódź has been added to UNESCO list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity. In Łódź, central Poland, after reading a passage from the Gospel of John, Archbishop Grzegorz Ryś focused on Christian unity, using the example of Liverpool, where years ago a Catholic and Anglican bishops together led their faithful to faith in Christ.
Ile razy słyszeliście tę modlitwę?
How often do you hear this prayer? What will it do for us? What will this prayer of Jesus do for us? What determination of unity will there be in us? You see, the gospel diagnoses us very well. We make excuses that we don't have unity because we don't have a common structures, we don't even celebrate the Eucharist together. we don't have common structures. But Jesus says in this prayer that unity is not about structures, but about love. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited the flood-stricken southern region of Kherson, where hundreds of people were being rescued from rooftops after the destruction of a huge dam. Drone video showed areas where only the roofs were visible above the flooding. The region's governor said some 600 square kilometers were underwater. The dam collapse happened as Ukraine prepared its counteroffensive, likely the next major phase in the war in which tens of thousands of people have been killed, millions uprooted, and entire cities reduced to ruins since Russia's special military operation began on February 24th last year. Russia and Ukraine have traded blame for the bursting of the Soviet-era Kakhovka hydroelectric dam, which sends water cascading across the war zone of southern Ukraine in early hours of Tuesday, forcing tens of thousands to flee. Ukraine said the floods would have hundreds of thousands of people without access to drinking water, swamp tens of thousands of hectares of agricultural land, and turn at least 500,000 hectares deprived of irrigation into deserts. There is a shortage of doctors, as many of them left due to the war. I understand your needs. We will help you. We are grateful for your work. You are heroes. The Kremlin said Russian President Vladimir Putin has no plans to visit the region, but was monitoring the situation. Putin, without providing evidence, has accused Ukraine of destroying the Russian-controlled dam at the suggestion of its Western allies. Kyiv said several months ago the dam had been mined by Russian forces who captured it early in their invasion, and has suggested Moscow blew it up to try to prevent Ukrainian forces crossing the Dnipro River in their counteroffensive. It is not known how many people may have died as a result of the flooding.
So we're still establishing definitively the cause of the attack on the dam in Ukraine, but I want people to know that we're playing our part to support the Ukrainians in their response. We provided resources to the United Nations and the Red Cross in advance, anticipating incidents like this. Those resources are now being moved into the region to help support those families affected. This is an appalling act, and hundreds of thousands of people are being affected by it. We'll continue to provide support for the Ukraine.
The immediate threat to us and our staff and civilians is the fact that mines might move, and that will lead to the need for us to resurvey these areas, remark them as minefields, and obviously reorganize ourselves in terms of how to approach the clearance problems. Beyond that, the mines might not only move, but they might also fluctuate in terms of the way they're laid, which poses another risk for our staff that they need to be prepared for once we're able to clear the mines.
A Syrian national wounded 4 young children and an adult in a knife attack in a park in the southeastern French town of Annecy on Thursday. Some of the victims are in critical condition. A police spokesman said the attacker was a 31-year-old Syrian asylum seeker who carried Swedish identity documents and a Swedish driving license. He entered France legally and was not known to security agencies. His motives were unclear, an investigative source said, adding that anti-terrorism authorities had not been asked to lead the investigation at this stage. I was running on the lake shore and I see all of a sudden, a dozen people running in the opposite direction and I wonder what is happening. And all of a sudden, a lady says, "Run, run, there is a guy who is stopping everybody all along the lake. He stopped some children, run." French Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin, who traveled to Annecy with Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne, said on Twitter that the attacker had been arrested. BFM TV showed a footage of several policemen overpowering an individual in the park. 2 children and 1 adult were in a life-threatening condition, while 2 children were less seriously hurt, police said. The wounded children were aged between 22 months and 3 years, they said. One of the wounded children was a British national, British Foreign Minister James Cleverly said. Now it will take time until parents again take their children to playgrounds, since I think the trauma will stay forever in the towns of Annecy, because this is the first time. This has never happened here, as far as I know. But no, things like this will happen again in places that we don't expect. That's what will happen. Everyone expects this to happen in a big city like Marseille, Paris or Lyon. But now the target will be the places where no one expects it to put fear into people. An attack of absolute cowardice this morning in the Annecy Park. Some children and an adult are between life and death. The nation is in a shock. Our thoughts accompany them, as well as their families and the mobilized emergency responders. Witness said at least one of the wounded children had been in a stroller. The incident took place at around 7:45 GMT in the playground in a picturesque lake park in Annecy, a town in the French Alps. Yes, of course there is a fright, because we never thought this could be possible in such a calm, peaceful environment as Annecy. Several witnesses described the Le Parquet Park, where the attack took place, as an unusually tranquil place, popular with tourists for its stunning views of Lake Annecy and the mountains. Ladies and gentlemen, a terrible tragedy took place this morning in Annecy. Small children were savagely attacked by an individual in a park. We are shocked by this heinous, unspeakable act. When it affects children, I think we are all affected profoundly. And today our whole country is in a shock. At first glance, at this stage, he is a Syrian who has refugee status in Sweden for 10 years and who applied for asylum in France, which was pointless since he already has a refugee status. So, at first glance, it is an isolated Syrian individual with refugee status granted in Sweden 10 years ago. France has been shocked by a number of violent incidents in the past few months, including the fatal stabbing last month of a nurse in the northern town of Rémy. Also, last month, a drunk driver accidentally killed 3 policemen. That's it for now. Join us tomorrow, same time.